It's great to see those of you I can see. I see Mike and Maria up here on my right. Yeah, hi. Are you guys in the US or this is Norway? Yeah, it's Norway. Okay, we should get started. As Shiv was saying, this is more or less the second anniversary of our meeting and our first Zoom, which was a really positive event for both of us, I think. Heartwarming, really. And today is also a great anniversary. It's been 1 year exactly since John Troy arrived here in Todos Santos with his friends to join the gathering that we had last December. And he's here. I know a lot of people want to hear from him. I've received a few messages like that. So after Shiv and I have a chance to chat for a while, we'll make him the first contributor to speak. Shiv has just come out with a book recently that's attracting a lot of attention. I had intended to read a lot of it, but I didn't get to. We had a kind of emergency here, which fortunately came out all right, but the last week has been a bit hellish. So I did not really get to read much of it, but I do know a lot about Shiv's thoughts because I have followed his Advaitaholics page. Well, I'm going to read a couple of things that he wrote on Facebook and then ask him to join the meeting and comment. He got into a bit of a tiff with a mutual friend. And one of the things he said that I really liked was, there's no need to try and spiritualize this. It's just people being pissed off like ordinary human beings. That really appealed to me a lot. We're all ordinary human beings in my view. If we can accept that, I think we can move forward with some confidence that we're not going to completely spin out and lose our grasp on reality entirely. So that was a great comment. Then I like this one from Shiv also. No fucking Jesus, no fucking Kali, no fucking Nisargadatta. God, a human being can't even have a fucking tantrum without putting a spiritual spin on it. That was also beautiful. We'll get Shiv to comment on that. And finally, no, you're not spiritually evolving, and neither am I. Neither is anyone else. We're overgrown children with hurt feelings acting out. End of story. Okay, Shiv, you're on.
Those are interesting, interesting quotes. Obviously, the context is equally important, and the context being this was a person's page on which a lot of back and forth had been happening. Is my sound okay, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. And so, Robert, you know, there was a lot of, I would say over a period of about 2 or 3 days, there was a lot of heated debate about certain language that was being used in the context of a certain post. And a lot of people were getting pretty irate, but as is typical in this spiritual culture, people were kind of couching that with a lot of passive aggression, whereas I was just being openly aggressive because that's, when I'm aggressive, I choose to be openly aggressive. There's no point hiding it. You might as well just come out with it and tell people you're pissed off. And so, you know, there were a couple of comments where people were trying to put a spiritual spin on it and say, oh yes, this is all a learning experience, and this kind of expression helps us become more spiritual. And I was like, no, it's just people being pissed off. There's nothing, you know, you don't need to put that kind of spin on it constantly in order to make something more palatable to you. Why can't we just be, you know, flawed individuals who have a moment sometimes, lose our tempers, and then we're done with it, you know? And so I think that's the context in which those comments were made. However, having said that, the person on whose page that interchange happened is a person that I really get along well with, and we've actually had you know, a little interview recently, her and I, and I really respect her work. So obviously none of that had to do with any personal animosity. It was more the, momentary kind of conflict.
Right. Well, I actually appreciated seeing you write those things, because I guess, as you know, I'd rather center us in this world of psychology, emotions, physicality, sexuality, than to imagine that there's some other place that we're able to escape to if we don't like what's going on around us.
Absolutely. And I think, where else would you ever want to be centered? Now, ground zero is where it's at, and ground zero isn't pretty. It never is, rarely is. And yes, we have those moments which are, calm and peaceful, and we have those moments in which everything falls into place and makes sense. But those moments don't last, and they don't last for a reason, because we're not psychologically perfectly integrated human beings. We're all works in progress. And just like, I have some work going on at home, and my place is basically a construction site. So this is the best angle you have of the house. You don't want to see the rest of it. But that's the process. Everybody is a construction site, and it's a work in progress. So you're going to expect things to be messy. You're going to expect to bump your foot into things. You're going to expect to be pissed off, and that's okay. So this whole attitude of putting a Band-Aid over things and covering things up, and I honestly believe spiritual culture is one elaborate game of cover-up. Doesn't really help anybody in the long run. It might help people cope with short-term, especially when trauma gets too much, or they have some issues that are really debilitating them. To cover things up, to gloss things over temporarily may help as a short-term strategy, but by no means is that ever a long-term strategy. Right?
Okay. Well, the name of your webpage, your Facebook page, and the title of your new book is Advaitaholics Anonymous.
That's right. Advaitaholics Anonymous, being a play on words. It's basically a recovery group from the addiction to not only Advaita, but also all kinds of spiritual traditions and cultures.
So how do you recognize someone who's a Advaitaholic?
It's not very hard, is it, Robert? I mean, you can recognize them from a mile away. There's just, it exudes. They exude it in their body language, in their demeanor, in their language, in their life choices. And I know a lot of really wonderful people. And this is not an accusation by any stretch of imagination. I mean, I've been down that road myself, and I'm sure you have. So we all understand how easy it is to fall into that trap and get stuck there for years, sometimes decades. And so I know a lot of people who are really wonderful people, but are caught up in that idea that things can be all right if you just imagine them to be. You can actually put that veneer over your life and forget about everything else. And you can separate yourself out from your problems, out from your suffering, out from yourself. You could just subtract it all out and it just goes away. But that doesn't really make sense. Nothing in the universe works like that. Everything has a process that's constantly unfolding and trying to come to conclusion in itself from every scale at which reality exists. Why should human beings be exempt? But that's not really, appealing to most people, right? Nobody wants to believe that, there's a good chance I'm going to live out my whole life. My problems are not going to be solved. Some of them will, but then I'll get new problems and I'll die. Well, that's not a very appealing, marketing strategy. So you want to sell something to somebody which says, hey, your whole life is this neat little package, and we can figure out how to get this baggage out of your life, and things will be okay from there on. And that ends up really causing even more suffering for people than it's worth.
So is there some middle ground that you can point to that's somewhere between I'm this miserable little frightened animal and I'm God? Is there some where
well actually those aren't two extremes in my mind. They're the same thing. The only reason you would claim to be God is because you are a miserable, frightened little animal. Otherwise, you'd be content just being a normal human being, a man or a woman. the whole God complex comes about because it's the ultimate superiority complex, and you're a psychotherapist, so you know this well enough that the only reason people adopt superiority complex is because they feel deeply inferior. So human beings, we're all born with this feeling of inferiority to some extent because we see this vast universe around us, which is just so large and powerful, and we feel so insignificant in comparison to it. And so then we develop this God complex in order to be just as powerful as life, or even more. But really, it isn't about power. It really is about connection, because once you see yourself as a part of it, as a part of an ecosystem, then you understand your role within it. Then you're not in conflict against it, trying to dominate it, trying to conquer it, or trying to be something apart from it. You're more than content just playing your part in this life. So those two extremes are really one and the same, the way I see things.
Well, that makes sense to me. Do you have more that you'd like to say, or shall we throw the meeting now open to comments and questions?
Yeah, I mean, we could throw it open to comments and questions, because I think a lot of that discussion will be stimulated from there. I did want to mention, though, that the Advaitaholics page was, so I've been writing on it for just over 2 years. And about a year ago, New Sarum Press, which was the publishing company that published your book, decided they wanted to publish Advaitaholics in book format. And so they asked me to put together a certain selection of articles in order to publish in that book form, which has now essentially come out. This is the Advaitaholics book. And a number of your viewers are aware of it, I believe, because we share a lot of readers naturally, because we are quite similar in our thought process.
Yeah, hold it up again for the YouTube people who aren't familiar. A lot of people, many people will be seeing this on YouTube eventually.
Right.
They may not necessarily know who you are, or
right.
So let's get another shot of the cover.
Yeah. So this is the book. It's basically just the title of the page, Advaitaholics Anonymous. And I don't know if you can see the subtitle, Sobering Insights for Spiritual Addicts, which is essentially exactly what we've been talking about, right? And that's my lovely face on the back of it. And so, people who are familiar with the page will be familiar with some of these articles. But a lot of people who are not, this is a great way to get introduced to the whole Advaitaholics Anonymous theme, because with a blog, it's a post a day or post every 2 days sort of format. It's a great way to engage on a periodic basis, but the book sort of reorganizes those articles in terms of subject matters, and it really helps the reader do a deep dive into some of the themes being discussed, as opposed to this one-off sort of blog post format on the page.
Okay, so I just want to remind people at the meeting that the way you get recognized is to raise your hand. And to go over that just one more time for the late arrivers, at the bottom of the screen in the middle, more or less, is a item called participants. If you click on that, the participants window opens on the right side of your screen. And at the bottom is a button that says raise hand. So if you push that, David Matt will know that you want to be recognized. So David, at this point, I'd like you to recognize John Troy, and let's have him jump into the meeting. Beautiful. Hi, John. What a beard you've got now, man. Things grown. Yeah. It's great to see you, brother.
Yeah, likewise. That year went by fast, didn't it?
It sure did.
It was a fast year. I'd like to thank Shiv for his post and his work. I really appreciate his body of work. I share a lot of his posts because it speaks for me. And I think it's honest and straightforward and doesn't pull any punches. And I really like that about his work. I continue to appreciate Robert's body of work. I think it's really will be a classic in years to come. It seems like from time to time you have people that emerge that pull the curtain back on everything. And it's like Jesus did it, Buddha did it, Ramana did it, different people do it. And then after they're dead, these people are glorified and idolized, and a God squad forms, the doctrine forms, a priest class comes together and fucks the whole thing up. And then they're not ordinary human beings anymore. The equality vision is gone. And I think right now, just like Krishnamurti or others have done, Robert is speaking for a lot of us. I know he speaks for me in a really a good way. And I really honor and respect that tremendously. And I know they want to crucify him like they want to crucify every other person who's spoken up in their time and in their own way. But this whole spiritual thing on the left is just as ridiculous as this evangelical thing. It's chasing unicorns and rainbows and this reincarnation stuff and all. It's just nuts. And when I met Robert, I found a true comrade in this, and it allowed me to be more honest and speak with someone who could really wasn't duped by all the new age stuff, this new wave of so-called spirituality, because it's to me it's the same old wine in a brand new bottle, whether it's A Course in Miracles or Muji or whatever it is. It's ridiculous, and it's every bit as ridiculous as what we see with the QAnon and the fantasies on the right. To me it is, and I kind of like the middle of the road on this stuff. Being able to get rid of these doctrines of sin and what you ought to not be doing. And so I much respect Robert, and I really mean that. I enjoyed our time a year ago immensely. We had a great time and a lot of fun, and we didn't have any of this. We weren't humming together or meditating together, doing anything like that at all. We were just hanging out as ordinary folk, and it was wonderful, just as we are, without having to put on all the pretense of being holy people or something like that. But anyway, I think it's natural for people to want to explore. I love to explore things. I've delved into a lot of different things and explored them and see what I see and move on. But there's nothing wrong with exploration. That's fine. But I'm not addicted to it. I can be at peace. To me, that's the most wonderful thing in life is to be able to enjoy being in repose, which comes naturally. I watch a bird or the kitty or anything else, they're certainly capable of being in repose. And it's natural for a human being to be in repose. It's natural for a human being's mind to bloom like a flower. And it is a marvel. But all of nature is a marvel. I have a lot of gratitude for life and my friends and all of that. And that's about it. I don't think I'm making any progress anywhere. I don't see things in terms of progress. I just kind of take care of what's arising with me right now, and the rest of it seems to work out just fine. Just by taking care of the here and now. I'm 81. I'm remarkably healthy considering all the things I've been through. Old age is not so bad. It's not bad at all. I kind of like it. I want to stick around a while longer. So I'll let somebody else speak a while. And thank you.
Well, it's actually really nice to meet you, John, because we've had quite a few interchanges on Facebook, and you've been sharing my posts for quite some time. And we've had some discussions in the past about your colorful history in India and all of that. So I've been sort of looking forward to meeting you. So it's nice to finally see you, put a face in the name, and hear your voice. And I think what you said about, it's beautiful to behold a mind blooming, but it's just as beautiful to witness a flower blooming, and that's really essential, I think, in putting human life into context. Because no matter how much of a genius an Einstein or a Ramana can be, I mean, the little plant growing outside your house is just as much of a miracle. And if we were able to see all of that on the same level playing field, we wouldn't distort our images of other human beings as much. But the fact is we don't. And so a Ramana occupies more of our attention than the flower does. And it's because of that distortion that we tend to inflate our images of these people. And I like that analogy you use of, Toto pulling the curtain. You use that one quite often, referencing the Wizard of Oz movie. And that's essentially it. I mean, guys like Robert, guys like myself, and maybe a couple of others are motivated to do that. And I don't think, I mean, I can't speak for Robert, but for myself, it's not personal. I don't have anything personal against this guru or that guru. It's not about a vendetta at all. It's just really comes from a feeling of being really pissed off. I'm pissed off of what's going on here. Like, this is not what life is supposed to be about. You've got a short opportunity to explore life if you want to, if you feel so inclined. You don't have to. A lot of people don't. But if you feel like exploring your own existence and questioning those things, you have this amazing opportunity to do it on your own terms. And somebody's coming in and hijacking that process and selling you this fucking bullshit, and you're just off on this goddamn ride for 20, 30 years of your life, missing out on that opportunity to do it yourself. And that's what pisses me off. It's not even the people themselves. It's that whole mechanism that's been going on for God knows how many fucking millennia, right? And it just keeps, this history repeats itself. And really the onus is upon the individual, because we're taught from a young age not to take responsibility for ourselves, for our own lives. Like, okay, shove responsibility on the government, on your parents, on your teachers, on your gurus, whatever. They're going to tell you how to do it. But really this is about taking back that responsibility and saying, even if I get the wrong answers, it's fine. At least they're my wrong answers. I want to explore this on my own terms. And that really is empowering, I find. I've gone down all kinds of paths myself in my life, explored all kinds of things. But I can honestly say I own my own mistakes. I'd rather have made my own mistakes than followed somebody else's perfect path, right? And I think that authenticity shines through in Robert's writings, shines through in my writings, or a few others, because you can tell that they're not using the lingo everybody else is using. It's not regurgitation. It's coming from authentic experience. And when you speak, I can tell you're speaking from your own authentic experience. And that's all really anybody needs to do.
I think now that John has spoken, let's have questions and comments for Shiv. If anybody wants to do that, raise your hand and be recognized. I see Tim would like to speak. He's waving his hand.
Is that okay?
We hear you.
Okay, other thing I wanted to mention is I watched The Wizard of Oz last night with my son because I had talked with John Troy. And John, I got to tell you, listening to you talk about The Wizard of Oz with whatever it is you've got inside you that is very insightful, it was a lot better than watching the movie. The movie was fun, but listening to you was much more impactful than watching the show. The show was great. I just want to mention that. But anyway, I'm out. I'm just going to mute myself. Thanks for doing this.
Okay, thank you for that, Tim. David, more questions for me or questions for John or anyone else? Manfred.
Yeah. Shiv, what made you change? I read a little bit from you that you had been at a SAND conference and driving home, somehow your whole looking at the thing changed. So what happened inside that? It sounds like you didn't believe into the possibility of enlightenment or awakening or whatever we would like to call that thing. So what made the change happen in you?
Yeah, that's a good question, Manfred. Before I answer that question, let me just clarify how I use the terms enlightenment and awakening, because that'll give some context maybe to your question. So those who are not familiar with my writing or my book, I define awakening as a point in time experience. Okay, and this is something that happened to me in my 20s. I had been severely depressed for close to a decade. I was at a point where I was contemplating suicide on a regular basis. And really, I saw no path out or no path forward. And quite unexpectedly, at the time, I wasn't terribly involved in spiritual teachings or anything of that matter. I was more reading Dostoevsky and Nietzsche and wanting to kill myself. So at that point, I did have an experience where for about 4 months, it was sort of like a catastrophic nervous breakdown, which for 4 months,
Ese es el de la derecha.
that's what I mean about life being a learning experience, right? I mean, you're never going to get the perfect Zoom and you're never going to live the perfect life. So everyone, let's just relax and figure it out, right? But yeah, back to Manfred's question, if I may. And so, yes, I do believe awakening is possible because I have experienced it. But I do believe it is a point in time experience. It is an experience that lasts. It could last for a minute. It could last for a day. It could last for 4 months, as it did for me. Or it could last much longer. And when something like that happens, it's a complete interference of the brain's normal functioning. And so you experience life completely differently than you do on a regular basis. The selfing function of the brain gets muted for some time, and you begin, like, life just basically blows wide open. However, I don't think that is an experience, that is the pinnacle experience, or that is the experience that one ends at. It's really just a glimpse. It's a glimpse into a deeper way of functioning, that then the whole spiritual process becomes about clarifying your own inner mess. And that is it's always juxtaposed against that experience. And that's a work of a lifetime. That never really ends. And so there's no real enlightenment in the sense of you've reached this point where you're this ascended master and nothing bothers you anymore. But rather, enlightenment, the way I define it, is a process of constant clarifying of consciousness. And that's something that we're all going through. We're all enlightening, but no one's ever really fully enlightened because there is no endpoint to that process. And so that is one of my contentions with a lot of spiritual teachers who claim to say that they've arrived or they're done. No, you're not done. You're never done. As long as you're a human being living in a human body, having human experiences, every day something else is going to challenge you in a way that you've never been challenged before, and you're going to learn something more from it, regardless of who you are. You could be Ramana or you could be Rob, right? So with that little caveat, to answer your question, now, you're referring to an article, Manfred, in which I talked about in 2012, I attended the SAN conference and I spoke at a 20-minute speaking spot. And at the time, I was quite involved in these spiritual teachings and reading spiritual books. I was reading Adyashanti, Eckhart Tolle, these kind of guys, the standard fare for most people. Because I had had my awakening experience some 15 years prior, and I was sort of grappling with understanding what had happened to me. I didn't have the words, the lingo, the understanding, to be able to put it into perspective. And so I did what most people naturally do. They just go to the experts who claim to tell you that they know exactly what's happening and how to figure it all out. And so I was in that. And when I attended the SAN conference, I went with this whole attitude of, oh, wow, you know, I'm going to finally meet all these people and it's going to be wonderful and I'm going to get to speak there and perhaps I'll get recognized and all of this, you know, the very idealistic lens on life. And when I got there, it was within minutes of actually being there, then I realized that this is not what I've envisioned it to be. This is just another, like John Troy actually referred to it as a trade show in one of his comments. And it actually felt like a trade show in any industry. There were people schmoozing with each other, people, you know, trying to get noticed, people, there were hierarchies, pecking orders, all of that. And I looked at that, I said, hey, what does this have to do with spirituality or enlightenment or any of that? You've got your celebrities, your A-listers, your B-listers, your C-listers, and then the general rabble. And there's this huge display of people trying to get noticed or trying to, you know, occupy that elite, you know, they belong to that elite class. And that whole thing was a huge turnoff for me. And so at the end of the first day, my speaking engagement was on the third day. At the end of the first day, driving home, I was with my wife and her aunt at the time. I was like, I don't know if I want to go back there and speak at this. And they said, well, you've been wanting to do this for months and you've been excited about this. I said, yeah, but this is not what I expected. It was a very, very sobering kind of realization. And very disillusioning because and disheartening because it had taken all that hope that had built up in my system and completely squashed it out. I was looking at the same people that I'd hoped to meet one day, and I don't really care to have a conversation with that guy or her, because I could see the whole facade. I could see through the whole facade firsthand. I did end up going and speaking at it because I realized as my family reminded me, I had made a commitment, and it's important to keep your commitment. So I didn't end up speaking at it, but I didn't linger much longer than that. And so, to your point, it wasn't that I realized that there's no such thing as awakening or anything of that sort. I saw spiritual culture for what it was. And I saw in that moment that spiritual culture, and that is everything to do with spirituality, the books, the videos, the satsangs, the gurus, the retreats, all of that whole business is a giant decoy from what spirituality actually is about. And that is a highly personal process. Nobody can teach you spirituality. Nobody can help you improve at it because they have no idea what your own subjective experience is. And your spirituality is highly connected to your own subjective experience of reality. And so that is the starting point. And the moment you take yourself out of it into somebody else's reality, that is their subjective reality, but that reality is objective to you. It's not subjective to you. And so you're just living out somebody else's fantasy. It really does not apply.
Great point. I like hearing that.
Thank you.
I wonder if that answers your question, Manfred.
Yeah, very beautiful. Thank you, Shiv.
You're welcome.
Yes. Hi, guys. Well, I just want to say I'm new to all of this, and I guess you could say I'm a spiritual addict. My background, I had my existential crisis. I did the whole spiritual circus. And yeah, I stumbled upon both of your pages, Robert's and Shiv's, recently, like a month or two ago, but this year. And I got you guys books. I've been reading it. I don't really have an opinion. I'm more of a still of a skeptic of what you guys are saying, but I mean, there's basically what I want to ask is, so from what it sounds, Shiv, you still are giving value to there's a doer, right? There's autonomy. There's a choice to be an addict or not, right? My thing is, if this is all a dream and I'm experiencing this dream, um, how do you navigate it then? If it's because I'm talking about like non-duality standpoint, right? Advaita, if it's all an illusion or whatever, how do you live after seeing through that? Like you're a business consultant or something. I read your preface, but how do you live after that? Like you have a kid, you have a wife, like what else is there to life?
What else? Well, there's another kid, so there's that. But that's a good question. So I have two kids. I have a wife. I have a life. I have a normal everything. And when you said, well, if there's no doer, then how do you do that? That's a good question because that trips up a lot of people, right? But here's the thing: there may not be a doer from an absolute perspective, but there is an apparent doer. And anybody who claims that there isn't an apparent doer is sort of in denial. And the analogy I'll use is this. If you study physics, for example, they'll tell you that, an atom is 99.999% space. So the chair you're sitting on is mostly made up of space. So you know that from a factual perspective, that is true. But that doesn't stop you from sitting on a chair. It doesn't stop your ass from making contact with a solid surface. And so your nervous system is designed to sense that chair is solid, even though factually it's not. And so it is apparently solid, and we live in an apparent world. And even though the reality might be that there is no such self, there is an experience of one. And for me, the self is really a function of the brain, kind of like memory. So for example, your past isn't true, right? It's a memory of events that have happened. Obviously, there's a history there, but the way you choose to remember them is not necessarily factual. However, it's almost impossible not to have a memory. It's just a function of the brain. The brain is going to throw up memories constantly. You may choose to recognize that those memories don't actually happen. And that is a strategy you can use in living your life. But your brain will always create memories and it'll always stimulate your imagination of perceived future scenarios. Similarly, the brain is designed to create this sense of self. And there's a very important evolutionary reason for that. It's how you know how to survive. Otherwise, you'd have no basis by which to try and survive, because there wouldn't be no boundary between you and somebody else, and there'd be no impetus or agency to want to perpetuate your survival. So that aspect of feeling a sense of self is always there. Of course, there are moments in which that sense of self bleeds into the environment. Moments of silence, moments of quietude, moments of meditation, when all of that blends in together, right? But that isn't a very highly functional state. When I talked about my awakening, that happened for about 4 months. I was in that state for a whole 4 months. It was very hard for me to do even the normal things that you and I can do today very easily, like go cook myself a meal, or even, motivation to take a shower. I was just sitting there on my balcony, just, stinking like a pig. And my ex-girlfriend at the time was like, when are you going to take a shower? You're just like a human vegetable. And she left me, understandably so. I was useless as a partner at the time because it's not a very functional state. And so you'll find, there's just tales of Indian gurus, and you're from India, I'm guessing, so you're quite familiar with this, who have to literally be force-fed because they're in this state where they don't recognize a sense of self, to the extent where they don't even know they have to feed themselves. And so they're just sitting there like comatose, patients in a hospital, and they're getting spoon-fed.
I'll have a follow-up if you don't mind.
You don't have, or you do have?
I do.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, okay. Now, coming from a radical non-duality perspective or whatever like they speak of this shift or calamity or whatever. So would you say that's your awakening? Was that the same thing?
Well, I don't know what another person has experienced. I can only look at their words and their experience, draw parallels, right? The only person who's used the word calamity is Yuji Krishnamurti, and he says he grew breasts. I never grew breasts, so I can tell you that mine wasn't like his. But when you look at descriptions of other people, there's some similarities there. So it's safe to say, yes, that is the same experience. But at the time when it happened, I didn't know it to be an awakening experience. I did not have that language. I did not have that background to be able to put it into so many words. So I think that helped me because it allowed that experience to be what it was for those 4 months. And it's only after the fact that I tried to then understand what it was. I said, oh yeah, that did happen and that did happen. So, that was an experience of no self, so on and so forth. Putting the pieces together after the fact. But when it happened, it was just like, whoa. What is this?
So,
and then it was after the races after that, because after a time it faded and the normal thinking mind comes back and the fearful sense of self, all of that comes back. And then you're like, how do I get back there? Because I never want to be in that state of suffering ever again. And now I know there's a way out. How do I get back there? How do I get back there? And you do that long enough, you realize you're creating a whole new stream of suffering, right?
So what do you tell someone when they just wave their hands around and say, this is it? Like, you tell them to fuck off? Like, what else is there than this?
I mean, I don't go around telling people to fuck off for no reason. I mean, if they want to say this is it, that's good for them. If they're going to come into my house and tell it to my face and not give me a chance to get out of there, then yeah, I'm going to be like, fuck off. Because look, this is it. But you don't have to keep repeating it. It's really something self-evident. And if you're repeating it to that extent, it's because you're trying to believe it, because it's really an ordinary truth. You're trying to make it extraordinary. That's all spiritual literature is. It's a lot of hype about something that's quite simple and evident. Most children, young children, know this is it. They don't run around yelling, this is it, this is it. No, they're just busy playing because they know this is it and they don't have to worry about it. But then you grow up and you start thinking, oh, there's a future to think about, and there's a past that I have to deal with, all this, and how am I going to pay the bills? And then it becomes this, life becomes burdensome, right? It becomes this huge, heavy weight you're dragging around with you, and you just want to be done. And then one day you look and you go, oh, wait a second, this is it. And yeah, initially you want to scream it out off the mountaintops, because compared to the life you've just lived before that, which was so burdensome, it feels like a great revelation and liberating. But after some time, you realize that your problems don't really go away. There's still bills to be paid. There's still relationships to be honored. There's still presidents to be voted for. There's your role as a citizen, your role as a parent. None of that changes. But this is still it. So you put it into perspective.
Robert has any comment on that?
Oh, let me get my video going. Are you hearing me, everyone? Yeah? Well, see, that's a very difficult subject, Bisham. I mean, Shiv is a very wonderful writer, very good with words. And yet, when he writes about this from my point of view as a participant in this beautiful life, his words fall short of what it feels like to be this aliveness. No matter how brilliant a writer he is or how good his words are, and they are good, they will never even begin to touch 1 millisecond of what it's like to really be alive, right? You agree with that?
Sorry, Robert, is it me or Bisham you're talking to?
Bisham, do you agree with that?
I actually don't know. I don't know anything. I can't even comment on it because I just don't know.
Well, you're alive now.
Yes, I'm alive.
So let's stay right here. You're alive now. And if you now sit there silently for just 5 seconds to observe something, and that is that there's this tremendous flow of thoughts, feelings, intuitions, fears, desires, sounds, sights. Yes? Can you see that? Okay. You are in the center of that, am I right?
apparently. Yeah, I guess
Yes,
so.
apparently. That's good. That's it. See, we don't have to believe anything. This is all something that can be grasped experientially in this moment. You can sit there and observe this flow. Am I right? I pointed it out to you and you say, yeah, okay. That's you in this moment. There is no other you. The problem with non-duality, in my view, and I'm a harsh critic of all that bullshit, it is bullshit, and I'll tell you why I say that. That chit-chat can't touch 1 millisecond of experiencing this flow in a full way. And if you take someone like a Shiv or a Robert, it's not that we're different from anyone else. I'm not different. I'm an ordinary human, except I'm very tuned into this flow because I understand that's the only me I will ever have. Ever. There's not this other me that I'm going to get to that's going to be superior to this. This is it. So when people say this is it, that's what they mean. They don't mean it's all the same. They don't mean you can just say this is it and be a lout, you know, and drink a lot of beer and get crazy and that's enlightenment. No, it isn't. Not at all. And the guy's just a lout. And this is an excuse to, well, he goes home and tells his wife, yeah, I got a blowjob, but yeah, that's what was happening. See, this is it. See, and this is what the non-duality people are all about. They just want to forgive all their sins by saying, oh, it's all one thing. It's the intelligence of the universe and all that. And then there's no human life. So here's how I want to answer your question. I'm tuned into this flow at all times. I don't forget it. It's that simple. And once you never forget this, everything changes. Not because you changed anything. You can't change anything. That was your question. If this is just a dream, how do I operate? You operate like the human primate animal you are. And stop dreaming that this non-duality thing means you're not really a human. Yes, you fucking are. And if you don't think so, snap out of it. Be here. That thing that I showed you 2 minutes ago, that is where we need to be if we want to say I'm awake. Not in some perfected universe that some guru described to you, but it takes 25 years sitting in a cave and no sex or, please, that's a hypnotic trance. It's been sold to the Hindus for thousands of years and you got a taste of it and it's in your conditioning and now you have to spit it out or else swallow it. That's what I have to say.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll let some other people speak.
You know, I'd like to add to what Robert said, because it's really, really important point that is once you realize that you're connected to the flow, I have found that if I look back in hindsight, I've always been connected to the flow in hindsight, but I never realized it in the past. When I was a child or when I was going through my phase of, being an angsty teen or suffering, all of that. And every time I felt completely disconnected, alienated from my reality. When I look back in hindsight, I realized I was always connected to it. But it's so obvious that it's easily overlooked because you're looking constantly elsewhere for it in somebody else's words. And like Robert said, he calls me a great writer. I honestly think I'm an okay writer, but I don't feel like my words enhance the ability for somebody to experience life in any way whatsoever. Okay? A cup of coffee can do a better job. If you really savor a cup of coffee, it can bring you into the moment more powerfully than any essay of mine or a book of mine can ever do. But that's the point, is that portal exists everywhere. But as long as you're looking for it in the words of other people or in the teachings of gurus, that's where you're going to constantly go, and you're going to miss everything along the way that exists as a portal into that moment. And it takes 5 seconds, 2 seconds, like Robert said. It's immediate, and it's the most obvious thing, it's the most consistent and obvious thing about your life that has been there all the way through. That sense of being. And that sense of being, if you really drop any sort of qualifications or words or concepts about it, that sense of being, really doesn't feel any different than the sense of existence around you. That isness and I amness are really one and the same thing. There's no basis on which that can even be bifurcated. But obviously then as a human life, then like Robert said, there's responsibilities too. You can't just fuck off on the fact that you got to pay your bills or you have people depending upon you. But they don't have to be mutually exclusive. They actually support one another as long as we're not stuck in that fear-based mindset.
That's great, Shiv. That's really good. This is where we were 2 years ago. We agreed on this right away, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
We're just doing our ordinary thing here, and there's no reason to mystify it.
Absolutely.
No reason to mystify it. And the thing I have against so-called spirituality, you and I both have something against spirituality. You got your angle on it. I've got a slightly different angle, but they're in the same part of the forest.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, you and I, Robert, we agree on a lot of things. And one of the things about demystifying spirituality is really not so much just demystifying it for the sake of demystifying it, but seeing how miraculous the ordinary really is. I wouldn't trade in the woman I'm with for the most, like a trophy wife or the most beautiful supermodel on the planet, because that's a vacuous kind of ideal to hold. Why would you when you have something so substantial, so meaningful in your life? I wouldn't trade in my kids for better behaved kids. So why would I trade in my own reality for anybody else's reality? It just means that you're missing what is substantial about your own life.
Well, you found love.
I did, yes.
Yes, well, that's the whole story in a way. That's the shift, Bisham. The shift isn't some shift where you become magical and can just do anything suddenly and you will never die and all that stuff. The shift is that you're here now and you're in love with something. It doesn't have to be a woman, but that's a good place to start, really. Because once you have that love, she may be able to explain things to you that you wouldn't have learned without that. A lot of things. It's great to have a partner that you love, but even if it's a horse, even if it's your garden, the fact of going there and putting your hands in the soil and saying, I really love to grow things. This is what my life is about. Or for me, getting out with the camera, it's so magical. I put the camera on my shoulder and suddenly I'm energized, see, because I love photography and I love to walk around in the world looking at things. That's what it takes, not these theoretical, I want to awaken, so I have to do 56 prostrations and count the beads. See, this is the mystification that I am. That's why I'm down on spirituality, because and John Troy and I agree on this perfectly. We just correspond. They're taking something that's natural and it's yours because you were born, mystifying it, and then selling back that mystification to you, and you have to pay for it. And that's the business. These things are simple. Not that you can hear what I'm saying and suddenly be enlightened, if that's what one imagines. That can't happen. But at some point, it's going to happen. When I was in psychotherapy school, it's a very deep process because the students and the teachers perform therapy on each other, and that's how you learn. So you observe all these therapies, and sometimes you try it, and the teacher or the other students said, you didn't really get it, Robert. You missed the problem, or whatever it is. So then the teacher said, yes, that's true, but let's look at it another way. When it was Robert's turn to swing the axe, he swung it as best he could. If he didn't get all the way through the tree, the next one that person comes into contact with might do it. So someone like Shiv or me, we just speak because that might be your moment. Probably isn't. Most likely not, compared to how many moments there are in life. But sooner or later, someone is going to say something to you, or you're going to have some realization when you're looking up at the stars at night. Something will happen. So that's what you need to know, Bishan. You don't need to have people lecturing you on how to be enlightened. just look for that moment. It's yours. It didn't come from the outside. It's in your heart, as Shiv was saying. They don't know your heart. The teachers, I don't know your heart. I know the human heart in general. I'm a psychotherapist. I've discussed it a lot, but I can't tell you, I can't have some magic procedure that I could give you that would make you wake up. You understand me? It's yours. It's inside of you. It's in your mind already. It can't be given to you from the outside. That can't happen. Well, I feel like I've given a lecture, so let's.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Like you said, I don't know if I'll digest this or spit it out later. I don't know, but it was great chatting. Thank you.
Bishop, I just want to ask you a question. Do you remember your childhood very well when you were a very young child, parts of it, snapshots?
Yeah, snapshots.
You know, other than for children who've been severely traumatized due to, you know, some horrible thing happening to them at a very young age, what I have seen of children, having children of my own, is they have this natural love of life. They don't even qualify that way. They don't understand it that way, but they just have this natural zest and enthusiasm for life until that's beaten out of them at some point. It's really unfortunate when that happens too young, because then that trauma lasts for a lifetime. But as to Robert's point about the love, you know, I wouldn't even call it a finding love, because it's not like I went out and found the love for my wife or found the love for writing or any of those things. It's that capacity is always there. It's just waiting to be released. And the only thing that ever holds it back is the fear of not finding. All right. And that's the dichotomy here. As long as you are afraid that you won't find, or that you don't have, or that you lack something, that lack becomes the very barrier preventing you from having it, because you already actually do. And so it's not that I fell in love with my wife. My love just expressed itself. Same way in my writing. And when people ask me why I write, you know, I write for very selfish reasons. I write because I love it. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't write, no matter how many people it was helping. I primarily write for myself. And that it helps people or provides them some perspective or clarity is the bonus. But I was writing for myself. I was writing well before I ever made it public. I'd write in journals. So that love for life exists in every avenue. But once again, as Robert says, that is really within you to find. And when I say find, obviously not finding it from anywhere outside, externally, but it's inside yourself. And sometimes it takes that one moment to trigger it. And it could be anything. For me, it was sitting by the side of a lake one day, so utterly defeated and exhausted. And I literally watched for 4 hours in the baking sun, a small sailboat cross the entire horizon. That's what it took for me. Watching a sailboat for 4 hours in what was like 39 degrees centigrade. Okay, so I'm not sure what it is in Fahrenheit. I was baked to a crisp at the end of it, but that's what it took to really bring me into this, holy shit, what am I a part of here? It's mind-blowing.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Great.
Hi, Robert. To hear you. I'm sort of a bit fascinated by the fact that you talk about spirituality. You even use the term spirituality. You know, because what I'm interested in is science. I mean, I've had, just to fess up, I've had many experiences. I've been in ashrams many years ago. I've done psychedelics. And what I like to look at is I like to look at science. And you talked about the brain, and there is something in the brain which is called the default mode network. And that is what gives us our sense of separate self. It gives us our sense of I am Stefan, you are, you know, this is Robert. But what I've just found out recently, which is really exciting, is that there is an even deeper sense of self than that, and that resides in the brainstem. And it's to do with very, very basic functions like breathing, excreting, digesting, and all that. And I think that all we're doing here, you know, when we're using words like spirituality and awakening and all these terms, and believe me, I've had all these, you know, amazing experiences, and so on, you know. I think that all we're doing is that we're identifying that brainstem is that functioning in all of us right now. If not, we'd all be dead or severely brain damaged. So I think to just take the whole word spirituality out of the picture, you know, just drop that word. You know, that word has got so much baggage with it, so much bullshit with it. Even if, you know, even your awakening, experiencing my awakening, experiencing me, it's just, to me, that's just bullshit. Sorry, that's the way it is for me. And I mean, I'm fascinated by the fact that I've had out of the body experiences, and I was really fascinated to find out recently that there is something called I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like written parietal or parietal junction, and you can actually stimulate this in people, and they will have an out of the body experience. So that's fascinating. So, you know, both of my out of the body experiences happened when I was undergoing trauma. Once I was beaten to shit by a gang, and I watched the whole thing happening from above. And another time I dived into a pool that had a rock in it, and I smashed my head open. And both times I went, my subjective experience was of going out. That fascinated me as to how that happens, but there is actually a brain, part of the brain that you can actually stimulate from that. Other experiences I've had, which are kind of more hard to explain, is being with a particular Indian teacher who was a devotee of Ramana, and he literally just looked down and looked up at me. And I lost everything. I found myself on a vast, white, empty plain. It was the transition was completely rapid. I mean, it might be Robert talks a lot about hypnosis. So it might be a form of powerful hypnosis, who knows, or energetic thing. But one thing that I've never been able to explain, and this is, I would like anybody to see if they can explain this, was I had a partner a long time ago, and his mother was a famous medium, and he had the gift of mediumship. He didn't particularly want it, but he had this gift of mediumship. Now, one day he said to me, I actually felt it as well. I felt like something cold in the room, something cold moving through the room. And he said to me, "Oh, someone's here." And I thought, "Oh yeah, right." And he then said to me, "Is there anyone? I see somebody in a uniform." And that's such an old trope that I kind of like groaned, like, "Oh God, this is somebody in a uniform here." You know, I mean, everyone's had somebody in the army or the services at some point in their life. But then he said, no. He said, write down these two dates. And I wrote down these two dates. So I have to sort of interject here and say that I was brought up Catholic, and my uncle, who I never met, died in the Second World War. And as a kid, I always used to feel, I looked at photos of my uncle, and I always feel that this guy was like my guardian angel. That's the way I transposed that thing to be, you know, I just felt something. Anyway, so I took these two dates. I went to see my mother, and I said, do these two dates mean anything to you? And she said, "Oh my God." She said, "Who gave you those dates? Those are the dates that your uncle was born and the dates your uncle died." So I wonder what part of the brain one stimulates to get things like that going on, you know. So it's interesting, you know, that whole thing's interesting. But I think we should, from my point of view, we should just drop the whole word spiritual and awakening, and, you know, it's all bullshit, all of it. As Robert says, as you say ultimately, oh, well, we're just fucking here, man. This is it. This is it. And we have brains, and the brains, you stimulate bits of them, you know, and we've got our default network going when we're awake. When we're not awake, it's not going. You know, I've studied Ramana for many, many years, etc. You know, he talks about when we're asleep, that it's the same as whatever you call it, the enlightened state, or he actually doesn't use that word much at all. But, you know, when we're asleep, there's no problems, there's no worry, but there's still functioning is still going on. In terms of science, we then go to the brainstem. That's what happens. Everything else shuts down, and the brainstem is functioning, of course, keeping us alive. So that, anyway, I've rambled on for a bit, but I'm interested in anybody's kind of input into what I've just said.
If Robert doesn't mind, I'd like to jump in there, Robert, because there's a couple of points that Stephen, is it? Stefan brought up that I'd like to address. And that is the use of terms like spirituality and awakening. And I understand your objection to it. I had that objection for a number of years as well. But first, to your point about the two levels of self, I agree with you. And that is what I term as the ego and the self. The ego being that conceptual character. And that is very much tied into your social reality. Who I am as a man, as a woman, as a citizen, you know, in my roles in society and so on. That's very much tied into that. If you were raised with wolves, you'd have a completely different sense of self-identity. And then there is that deeper rooted sense of self, which is more survival based, which is even if you were, you know, partially impaired, intellectually impaired, mentally impaired, you would still have certain survival responses to threat-based scenarios and so on and so forth. So that is a deeper rooted sense of self. But I'll tell you why I use the word spirituality, because I think it's not a word that should be done away with completely. It's because we live in two realities. We live in an objective reality and a subjective reality. And the language of our subjective reality is completely different than the language of our objective reality. What you've explained to me from a scientific point of view is how objective reality appears to us. But that does not explain to me why I feel like I'm in love with my children every time I see them. Like if I use the language of science to explain that, it's going to completely distort my worldview. It's going to distort even my emotions. I need a separate language to explain my interior world to me, even if that interior world is not any different than the objective world I live in. But to me, it seems like I inhabit two worlds. There's this very personal, subjective experience that's happening. And so, you know, in our last Zoom, when Robert and I had our conversation, we were talking about qualia, being certain subjective experiences created in our brains or our minds, like the redness of an apple. Like there's an apple, but the redness of it requires a conscious mind to perceive it. And that feeling of redness cannot be explained by science. It can be explained in terms of wavelengths of light and all of that, but the experience of redness cannot be explained by science. And if you try to whittle down the experience of an apple just to say it's an apple, and you took the redness out of it, you've lost something in the process. And so there's an experience to being a self. There's an essence to it. There's this form of qualia to existence that you cannot just rationalize away by saying there are two levels in the brain, you know, a self here and the ego there.
Can I interrupt here?
Sure.
Why can you not rationalize that as animals, we're just highly developed animals, and the subjective sense is just necessary for our functioning as animals, as clever monkeys?
And that's
why do we need to? I'm not denying the quality, and I'm not denying, of course, I would be an idiot to deny any, you know, quality in life and feelings of love and all of those. But why do you're what you're tending to do, what you're saying to me is that you're separating something out again.
No, I'm not separating it out. I'm trying to tell you that there's a subjective experience to existence that is different from the objective fact of existence.
Hold on,
Stephen. You've asked me a question. Let me answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, like, this is a great discussion. Let's not interrupt each other. So,
no, sure.
So just as you said, there's qualities to life, there's experiences of love, there's the redness of an apple, there's the appreciation of art, there's the appreciation of music. That entire universe of experience is greatly reduced when you put it in terms of simply defining this as animal instinct. Sure, I can accept that it is. I'm not saying it's not. I can say this is all evolutionary. I can say my feeling of love for my child is the result of a dump of oxytocin in my brain. That's fine. I'm not denying that. And yet, I do want to acknowledge that I feel love for my child. I don't want to reduce it to a dump of oxytocin. That makes it clinical and sterile. It reduces life to completely a blank slate, right? And so what I define as spirit is simply not some disembodied soul that's continuing through lifetimes, none of that. I simply say it is the sense of existence. It is a sense of being. That is spirit. And all spirituality is a means by which we focus in on that universal sense of existence beneath the thoughts about existence, beneath the identities, beneath the roles, beneath all of that. The sense, as Robert was talking just about it just a little bit earlier to Bisham, but he was saying 5 seconds it takes to just this feeling of being alive. That is spirituality. It's none of this other shit that people have built a culture around. But that is important to retain that definition, because once you lose that, you've lost the one anchor by which people can hone into that sense of being. And for some people, it might come quite naturally, and they feel it's a redundant thing to talk about, and that's fine. They don't have to. It's a choice. You don't have to use the word spirituality. It doesn't have to be relevant to you. I'm not trying to make it relevant to you or in your life. You may feel that you're able to operate and live a very full life without this word in your dictionary, and that's fine. But to say that this word is not needed, is not important for anybody else, I feel is taking that very scientific, materialistic, reductive approach to life by which you sort of whittle out all those the value of that subjective reality. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, but it's not like that for me. To say that, you know, right now my brain is functioning, your brain is functioning, everybody here's brain is functioning, you know, and to kind of say, to kind of overlay that, you know, everyone here is feeling something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The quality of life is exactly what it is for everybody here.
Well, it's not really an overlay, Stephen.
You're interrupting me, Shiv. You said
okay, go ahead, Stephen. I thought you were done.
No, I'm not done.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is to acknowledge the scientific basis of reality is not to, for me, is not actually to deny the marvel and the mystery of actually being alive. It's actually it's actually the opposite. It's to enhance it. You know, it's actually to enhance it, to say, oh my God, this is, you know, as you say, oxytocin, and you know, all we know about this. And you know, part of what I feel is that spirituality, if you want to use that word, I mean, believe me, I could spend the whole session here talking about experiences I've had. I won't bore people with it. But what I see it as is that as human, animal, monkey, you know, creatures, we're just becoming aware of our own nervous system. We're becoming aware of how this functions, And I think that's, for me, that's a miracle. That's wonderful, you know. You know, I don't see that any issue with it having a scientific correlate. It doesn't mean that it's dead or it's boring or I think, or when I have a feeling of love, I go, oh, that's oxytocin. No, I feel love or happiness. When I feel happiness, great, you know. And I think all these techniques that have been passed down for centuries, they're all means of doing that. I spent 3 months when I was 24. I spent 3 months in an Indian ashram. 5 hours chanting, 3 hours meditation, you know, minimal diet. You know, I was changing my body chemistry by that. That's what I was doing. You know, previously I'd taken acid and that did similar kind of things, you know. So these are techniques for changing our chemistry. These are techniques, you know, I think we're still clever monkeys and we'll get cleverer. You know, there's a lot of information out nowadays about how to do this, you know, how to do this with vibrations and lights and stimulating parts of the brain. So I think if we take, for me, taking out, I've been involved in cults and ashrams and yoga and all that stuff for a long, long time. And what I want to do is absolutely demystify that, you know, and say that it's got nothing to do with that at all. It's to do with our monkey brains, and we play around with our brains, and that plays around with everything, you know, and there's genetic functions and all sorts of things with that. So that's just my thing, because the sense that I got from you, Shiv, was that you were, you know, in one sense sort of denying it, and on the other sense kind of still selling it in some way. You know, you're still selling spirituality. I mean, that's all. That's just what I say. Yeah.
Okay. Can I respond to that now?
Sure. Cool.
So first of all, I don't think you'll find either Robert or I is opposed to science in any way. In fact, I personally uphold it as our highest understanding that we've achieved as human beings, our highest form of knowledge at this time. Neither of us is opposed to science. And this is not what this discussion is about. I think you've sort of conflated your opposition to the use of the term spiritual being somehow us being unscientific, and that's not the case at all. Okay.
I haven't.
Okay. So in terms of all those scientific correlates, they absolutely are relevant. I'm not saying they're not. Of course they are. And your experiences with spiritual ashrams and cults and stuff, that's, again, what I term as spiritual culture. And it's unfortunate that spirituality has become what spiritual culture has made it to be. Right? That is my big problem with it. Secondly, I'm not selling anything here, okay? I'm simply expressing myself in a way that I think is very important, that we don't swing to the other side in which we become overly reductive in our approach to life, which is what I think is happening a lot in this movement towards scientific materialism. I see value in, you know, explaining reality in scientific terms, but that does not mean we have to experience reality in scientific terms. We can still separate our experience of reality from our understanding of reality. And that experience of reality, when I talk, you mentioned overlaying it, you know, with this idea of spirituality. This idea of spirituality, or by this point of spirituality, is really meant to undercut, not overlay, to undercut that experience of our everyday subjective, you know, moods, emotions, attitudes, and so on, and say, hey, there's a ground zero level at which we exist, that we feel. It's a very ordinary feeling. It's not something mystical at all. In any moment of quietude, when you're just sitting by yourself, not thinking of anything in particular, you know, not worrying about things, and you just feel you're sitting here, and this is what Zazen is about. And the Zen approach is not that far off from what I'm talking about. Zazen is not about meditating. It's about just sitting. Just sitting, not for any purpose, not to not think or to have this experience. Just sit there. Just sit there. Feel yourself sitting there. That feeling of sitting there. Now, you might say it's the most simple feeling in the world, but the very fact that it's become so obscure because it is so obvious, because our minds are so busy focusing on all these other experiences of thought, of what we want out of life, of what society is, that we just miss that underlying buzz of existence. And spirituality is just redirecting your attention to that underlying buzz. That's all it is. It's really something quite simple. So it's not all of that. You know, I don't care about, I've had out-of-body experiences myself, 2 of them. I don't care about them. And I don't care what context they happen to me. They can be scientifically explained away. They could, I'm even willing to you know, accept that I was hallucinating. I don't care. I don't really care. My main thing is, you don't have to be lost in that, the constant making up of reality. There is a level at which reality exists that doesn't require you to build upon it. And it's just redirecting a person's attention to that I call spirituality. And it's really nothing to sell somebody on, because it's such a boring experience if you think about it. It's really mundane, right? But it can be quite miraculous when you're there, because you realize, holy shit, I'm just spending my whole life like a chicken with my head cut off, running from pillar to post, doing this, doing that, trying to fight fires, but why? I'm fine just sitting here. And life is not that bad. I could have more money, I could have more love, but it's okay. life is nice, life is pleasant, and I'm gonna fucking die anyways. Might as well enjoy it. That's spirituality to me.
What I'd like to say about that, Shiv, is that's exactly what you've just talked about. The ground zero is exactly the brain stem. That is the brain stem.
Okay, I wanted to interrupt at this point, if you'll forgive me, Stefan. If you can't, I just wanted to ask him if he heard me. If he's hearing me. He doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, I can
Okay,
hear you.
oh, he is. Okay, great. I wanted to jump in here because I appreciated your remarks earlier, Stefan, and I wanted to respond to them, but I was also following your conversation with Shiv, and it was moving further and further away from the part of what you were saying that I wanted to address. So that's why I'm jumping in here before I forget it entirely. My brain, since we're talking about brains, can only do so much. So, but before I get to that, Shiv, I have to respond to something you said, which is you seem to be bracketing your understanding of science and mine, and there is a big difference there. I heard it in your language where you said science explains things away. That's not science. Science explains things, not away. So that's
Sorry, Robert. I wasn't saying explains away. I was saying explains the way. The way things.
But then you also used the word scientific materialism. So I want to go into that for just. I'm not seeing myself on screen now as the speaker. Is that not happening?
We see you, Robert.
Okay, sorry. Materialism is an insult.
Exactly.
What science is involved in, as opposed to spirituality, is naturalism. Naturalism is not materialism. Naturalism includes thoughts and feelings, emotions, and all of that. But what naturalism says is, it's very likely, we don't know, but it's likely that all this arises from an early ancestor that arose out of a chemical bath that was produced starting with the Big Bang long, long ago. That's as far as we have penetrated with knowledge, not with this airy-fairy stuff. I would not say that these manifestations that Stefan was referring to, like the dates, I would not say that doesn't exist. It exists. It's obvious. There have been other mediums who managed to impress people with their insight. Some of them were frauds, but I can't believe that every case was fraudulent. That would be hard to believe. Or religious visions. I think sometimes people really have them for whatever they're worth. But I don't think they arise because there's some kind of outside intelligence controlling all of this. I believe that we humans manifest our own reality just as our early ancestors manifested a more primitive reality. And as these one-celled creatures that all came from the same original ancestor, everything, every living thing, plants, animals, all of it, mushrooms, we all came from one ancestor, one previous the earliest life form. And as that developed, the complexity of it developed. So the brainstem that we have that Stefan was referring to is a shared structure with many earlier animals. What we primates have done is grow a lot of structure on top of that. And that's the structure that we're using to have these conversations and all of that. So to imagine that these conversations have some correspondence to actual reality is really stretching the word reality way out of shape. We have our human reality, sure. There's a microphone here and I'm speaking and all that. Yeah, I get that. But we don't know what any of this is. We don't know where it came from. We don't know where it's going. We don't know the source of it, none of that. It's all totally mysterious. My argument with spirituality and why I refuse to use the word is because maybe not all of it, but most of it, in my opinion, 95% or 99% or whatever it is nonsense. It's cooked up explanation. You Shiv, said science explains things away. I think spirituality explains things away a lot more. They just say God did it, which says nothing. Or they say it's all one, which says nothing. It's a trope. It's nonsense. So it's not that I am a materialist, far from it. I mean, I live in the imaginal. I was an imaginal psychologist professionally for years. But what I am saying, what I have tried to argue in my work, is that someone can be awake in the sense that I find myself awake without being spiritual in the least, or even giving it a thought. I don't walk around thinking about this stuff at all unless someone asks me. Otherwise, I just take it for granted that I'm an animal on this planet, and whatever thoughts and feelings I may have about that is part of being human, and has nothing to do with God or the universe or any of that. I mean, the universe is out there in my experience, but maybe it isn't. Maybe that's just a human animal interpretation of some energies that we can't even imagine and never will be able to imagine. So I just want to close this little vignette by quoting J.B.S. Haldane. He was a scientist, he was an evolutionary biologist and great mathematician who managed to combine the two. And he died in 1964. And what he says is, I assume that the universe is not just stranger than we imagine, he said, but it's stranger than we can imagine. And that's where I am with it, Shiv. I don't even begin to understand these things at all. And the fact that I feel all these sentimental feelings, to me, really indicates nothing, except that having sentimental feelings is how my ancestors survived to procreate. That's how I got here. The feelings that we have are the feelings that enabled people to survive and fuck. And it's as simple as that. And so we are the survivors. We're the sexy ones here. We're the ones with the emotions that drive us and to be artists and impress girls or have relationships of one kind or another and need to or have orgasms and all of this. That's who we are. We don't want to accept it. So we cook up all this morality and spirituality and all that, but basically we're animals. And I think that's where you and I agree, Shiv.
Actually, Robert, I mean, I agree with 100% of what you're saying. And I want to first reiterate that I don't think science explains away anything. I think science is the only thing that explains anything and can explain anything. What I call scientific materialism isn't synonymous with science. Most scientists are not scientific materialists. There is a fringe movement that is becoming more mainstream now of this, what's called new atheism and all of that, where they become sort of fundamentalists about some of these scientific principles. And that is what I refer to as scientific materialism. But I don't think all science is materialistic, of course not. Like you said, it's naturalism in its basic form. And I am scientifically minded primarily before anything else. And I think the problem is that spirituality does not explain anything. It cannot explain anything. And the fact that spirituality has been used to explain reality to us has been the problem. Because spirituality is not qualified to explain anything to anybody about reality. Science is the closest tool we have right now to discovering that and finding ways to explain reality and models to provide for reality. And so in that sense, I do agree with you 100% that we are animals. We're biologically programmed. All of this is in our DNA. Everything we're experiencing is the result of that evolutionary mechanism of natural selection. Having said that, we can know all of that. And yet, when we sit down to have a cup of tea, that's not the kind of stuff that's running through our minds. Or when we're sitting down to do our taxes, when we're making love. that at that point, we're just being animals, right? And there is a certain ground level experience of reality, which you were actually pointing out to Bishop, that is also important to acknowledge. And I think spirituality does a good job of that if it's done right, which it isn't. 99.9% of spirituality, as you said, is a lot of explanation, and it's not qualified to explain. Those kind of experiences that Stefan had of mediums, I think it's fascinating. I can't explain it, nor do I want to. I'm fine living in a world in which stuff happens that I just have no way of explaining. Science can't explain it, but I'm willing to admit that there is no explanation for it. What I find with scientific materialists, that small section of people who claim to be science-minded but are really fundamentalists, they have an explanation for everything. So whereas your attitude is, I don't know, they're going to say, no, there's a scientific explanation for all of that. That's just a hallucination, that's this, that's that. And I think that attitude, I'm sorry, that attitude sort of misses out on that nugget of experience, which is what, when I use the word spirituality, tries to capture. That it's great to have this body of work and this approach that human beings have developed that helps us explain reality to us and helps put into perspective where we've come from, where our motivations are, where the subjective experience of life comes from, it emerges from the brain. All of that is fine. But there's also this other side where I'm a person walking around life, doing things, and I have problems, and I'm overwhelmed by my problems. I'm overwhelmed by my emotions. I'm overwhelmed by what my fear of the future, what might happen to the economy or with the coronavirus, all of this, or who the president. I'm overwhelmed by all of these things. And there's this one pointer that brings you back to, hey, you're here right now. And it's all okay. There's this ground level. And that's as simple as spirituality needs to be. Anything beyond that is bullshit, in my opinion.
Okay. So with that said, we probably should move on to other questions, give other people a chance to speak or comment.
Okay, yeah, Walter Driscoll is the next.
Okay. Are you there, Walter?
Oh, hello. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And a lot of questions I had were already asked. So I'll just say, first of all, I think spiritual experiences, that and a couple dollars will get you a cup of coffee. It's like, at this point, who hasn't, I don't think that I know very many people who haven't had a spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, if you want to use that word. But I agree with the gentleman that said we don't need that word. And what I hear from Shiv is like he doesn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I don't have any problem with throwing the baby out with the bathwater. When I had my experience, for what it's worth, it was like, I'm not the author. Grass growing, I'm just a part of the functioning of everything that's happening. No more special, no less special, just a part of the functioning of everything. And that's it, so when I started reading Shiv's work, it's like, I see a lot of promises about restoring people to spiritual sanity and, it's going to help people with spiritual addictions and sort of a lot of grandiose claims. And I don't see the type of humility that I hear in Robert's work in terms of not knowing. Like, I don't have the capital T truth and ultimate answers. As a matter of fact, I think it, it took away all that, and we're removed spiritual knowledge, because all the beliefs and all the shit just went away, and I saw it for what it was, you know, and it was just concepts that we came up to explain things, and now I'm comfortable in this not knowing. And it's like Rumi said, you know, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment, you know. And so anyway, I guess my question would be, you know, I hear a lot of contradictions, like you're not selling anything. I think you are selling something, and you think you're going to help people with spiritual addiction and restore people to spiritual sanity, whatever the hell that is. I just wonder, you know, what is it that you're selling? I mean, I know you're not selling anything, but you're presenting a program, Advaitaholics Anonymous. Like, what is it? I don't really, after listening to a few interviews, I still don't know really what it is that you're presenting.
It's a good question, Walter. Listen, all I'm presenting is my own fucking opinion, yeah? That's all I've ever, in over 2 years of writing, in over 400 articles, I've reiterated over and over again, this is one man's opinion. That's it. There's no truth here. It's opinion. And that's all anybody can offer. Your own experience that you're talking about is, again, your own opinion based on your own experiences, right? It's your own subjective view of life. I respect that. And the fact that the word spirituality is not important, not relevant to you is great. It doesn't have to be relevant. And there's no way I would try and convince you that, hey, Walter, you know, adopt this word spiritual again in your repertoire. Why? You're perfectly happy and functioning without it. And so, no, there's no upsell here. And if you were a regular reader of mine, because most of my regular readers know that there is no program I'm selling, and I'm not promising to make anybody sane. But what I do try to attempt with my writing is getting people off that hook to the rest of that culture, the gurus, all the rituals, the retreats, the meditation, all that stuff that people believe in. This is like a more commonsensical thing that says, hey, you don't need any of that. But that doesn't mean I'm saying you need to read my shit either, man. It's just my fucking opinion. That's it. And I don't claim that I know everything there is to know about this stuff. Far from it. Like, there's so much I haven't figured out about life. Literally, if I had to put down on a piece of paper, you know, one column, what Shiv has figured out about life versus what Shiv hasn't. There's going to be like 3 or 4 items on the left column, and the right column is going to be pages and pages and pages worth of stuff that I just don't know. And I'm okay with that. But that's not going to stop me from writing, because I enjoy writing. And all I'm doing is sharing my perspective of life. Not saying it's any more valid than yours. Not saying I know life better than you do. Not saying I have a better handle on the truth. Not by any stretch of imagination. And yet, I'm presenting my, viewpoint on life. And one of the points that I try to portray is that the inspiration that starts people off on the spiritual path in the first place, that thing that got you to suddenly say, hey, what is this thing called life? What am I? Who am I? How is this happening? That inspiration is not bullshit. That inspiration is a beautiful thing that gives so much richness and context and meaning to life. But the other stuff, when you start with that inspiration and then we go looking for the answers outside and everyone's giving it to us in different forms, I'm giving it too, in a sense. I'm giving my own version. But when you lose yourself in that and you lose context with where you are at in your own experience, then that becomes a problem. And so often, in my own writing, I'll say, if you've been hanging around here for 2 years reading my shit, time to get off that train and go do your own thing for a while. So, for example, I do one-on-one chats with people, all right? And there isn't, to date, there hasn't been a person who did more than 2 or 3 or 4 sessions with me. That's it. Most people just do one session, and they're like, I never need to do another session with them again. Not because I suck at it, maybe I do with some people, but because I make it very clear right off the bat, like, what the fuck are you doing here? Why are you even listening to me? You need to be listening to yourself, figuring life out on your own terms. And sometimes you need that person to say that to you to finally get you off that train. But maybe you don't need that. Maybe you can do it by yourself. And if you can, all the more power to you. You don't need a guy like fucking Shiv or Robert or anybody. But some people need that one fucking nudge in the right direction, and then they're good to go. But definitely there's no fucking hand-holding, man. That's not what this is about. I'm not interested in selling this idea of what life is to anybody. I don't even know what life is myself. What could I sell to anyone? I haven't figured it all out, man. I haven't even figured out like some of the basics about life. There are ways in which I feel very unevolved. Like there's people renovating my house. I'm not a very handy guy. And I look at these guys, and this guy's like building up drywall and he's building this shit. And I grew up, you know, in India where things were just done because, you know, there's cheap labor everywhere. And I look at these guys like, wow, I wish I could learn how to do this. So then I started teaching myself I built a little chair for my daughter, and I feel a sense of accomplishment from it. There's so much to life. There's so many things to learn, you know, physical things, emotional things, and in a sense, spiritual things too. But the way I use the word spirituality is very different than spiritual culture has made it out to be. And so a lot of opposition, I think, comes because people are so jaded by this loaded word. When they see another person using it, they're like, oh, okay, he's just trying to sell me something else. I'm really not. What could I possibly fucking sell you, man? You have yourself. You have everything you need.
I agree. It's kind of like the joke of self-help. If you need somebody else to help you, it's not self-help.
Right.
It should help.
Exactly. And you know what, man? I've made that obvious from the get-go. I've always made that obvious from the get-go. I've always said that at the end of the day, this has to be about yourself. It can't be about relying on somebody to constantly remind you, okay, now be with yourself, be with yourself, be with yourself. That just becomes another crutch, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, hi. So all of these are very interesting discussions to me. And I go back to what Robert said at the very beginning. It's just stop for 5 seconds and be in the moment and feel the intensity and the presence of it. And there's a lot of discussions about achieving higher states of consciousness that say seemingly mysterious things like, well, once you've realized this, you realize you've always been there even though you didn't know you were always there. And they're almost circularly amazing arguments that are hard to penetrate because they require some sort of a quantum jump from where you are to where you want to be. And when you get over to the other place, you realize you were always there. I mean, I get all that. I hear it repeatedly. I think that one of the things that moves all of us to try to understand is, in one sense, we're trying to get away from pain and discomfort and dissatisfaction with the way our existence is unfolding for us. And the other side of it is we'd like to have more sense of peace and happiness and satisfaction with being in the world as we are. And those forces move us. And when they move us, we get lost in storms of words. We get lost in theories of things like reincarnation. We go off down spiritual paths and follow masters and do all kinds of things that turn out to be an enormous waste of time, in my opinion. But what we're really looking for, as I said, is to alleviate the discomfort and produce more subjective satisfaction with being here. So when I hear these mysterious statements about, well, just be here, it's easy, you've always been here, I say, how? There's got to be something that happened between when you didn't have that experience and when you're having it now. And many people have the experience. I have the experience. But it just doesn't happen automatically like turning on a light switch. I mean, if you try to trace back your own trail, how you got to where you are, there's been insights, illusions broken through, things that you didn't see that you see now that have basically improved your experience for the better. And what I'm not hearing in these discussions is what some of those little insights are. And I tend to think about this stuff a lot. And if I might just provide a couple of examples of the kind of things I'd like to hear more about, is like, who do you know that hasn't sat at some time or other and wished that their past was different? Oh, I wish I hadn't have broken up with that woman. Oh, I wish I hadn't have gone to India, whatever it is. Almost everybody engages in some sort of a effort to wish, hope that the past was different. And in my opinion, that's just pissing into the wind. There's nothing we have ever wished about changing the past that has ever changed the past. And spending our time wishing to change the past simply removes us from this moment, which is the only moment that we ever have anyway of touching reality and altering the future. So any effort spent wishing to change the past is a waste of time. And yet almost everybody does it. And these everybody's who'd like to get closer to enlightenment and understanding, at some point along their journey, have to make that recognition that we can't change the past. It's not going to change. They need to turn that little light bulb on and wake up. And so those are the kind of insights that when they're all stacked up together, one upon the other, year after year after year, start clearing you out to where you can actually see this moment. Bear with me for a second. I'm a little bit like Robert. My brain kind of loses stuff at times. So another point is when we're growing up, our parents are talking to us, our schools are talking to us, our culture's talking to us, our friends are talking to us. We get an enormous amount of information put into our brain, and we're young and we're defenseless. And we don't know which of those voices is us, and we don't know which of those voices are the voices that others put into us. And as we sort of come into our maturity, start developing as a young person, as an adult, we're just constantly in a great warfare between what I want and all the shoulds that are yammering away in the back of my brain that were put there by my church, my mother, everybody else. We're like a split personality kind of an animal trying to figure out life, and there's all these voices going on inside of us. At some point, you have to review your own internal landscape and say, my mother told me not to cross the street because I might get run over by the bus. Well, that's what my mother said, but now I'm going to look at this and see if it makes any sense for me. And if it does, I'm going to take it out of the category of my mother said and put it into the category, this is what I want. I don't want to get run over by the bus. But on the other hand, my father told me I won't be a good person unless I become a lawyer. Well, I've done a big review of that, and fuck that. I don't want to be a lawyer. So I dropped that. And in the end, you try to pare yourself down so that there's nothing but your wants left, and all these shoulds are gone. And at that point, when you finally own yourself, you have a much easier chance of making some headway towards trying to figure out what life is about. My point, and I'm going to sum up here, is that as I listen to people talk about being here in the moment and how easy and obvious it is, I completely agree. And what I'm not hearing is the whole series of little decisions and understandings and illusions you suffered that you broke and had an insight. All those things somehow need to be put out there and shared with other people because they lead to us getting to the place that we're talking about. That's the end of my point. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good statement, Dennis. I found that very honest and well spoken.
Thank you.
Appreciated that a lot. I'd like to comment on it. Right near the end, in the last paragraph or two, you said the idea. I can't quote you, but the idea was you have to get this part of this programming together somehow, confront it and deal with it, so then you can put things in order. And my experience is that those can't really be split. The getting them in order always takes place for the rest of reality. And that's my argument with spirituality, which has like an ascended master or something. That to me is nonsense. We're human beings first. We've been subjected to all of these influences, as you laid out so well. Mom said one thing, Papa said something else. Everything's in an uproar. How do I get this tranquility deal that all the enlightened people claim to experience? I want that. And all I can say is that I consider myself awake. And I know it's audacious to say something like that. I fully understand that. I mean, you're not supposed to say that. If you're a Zen person, you say that, they hit you with a whisk, you know, it hurts. So, but I think it's time to say that you can be fully human and awake. That's what it means to be awake. It means that you realize that you will never rid your mind of this conditioning. You can notice some of it, you can make friends with some of it, little, but that's like an iceberg. Most of it's underwater. It's in the shadows. That's what we depth psychologists deal with. The client comes in and you manage to pull a few of these things out through dreams or free associations or whatever, and you say, hey, look at this. Your dad, when you were 10 years old, let you down somehow catastrophically. And ever since that point, you really haven't been able to move on emotionally. Let's say that's okay. The guy hears that, but that doesn't remove the injury. It just enables you to deal with that injury more sanely or more consciously. But that's all we ever get. The people who claim to be free of this entirely are lying. That's my main point in both of my books. There's a lot of liars, and they're lying to themselves. They're not all criminals and crooks. A lot of them are just deluded. They're on a big ego trip. They don't see a human limitation. So someone like me, and it's pretty rare really, that's why I say I find myself awake. I had to admit it. Wow, this is amazing. And it was hard. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos from the gathering. We had this gathering here a year ago, and a bunch of people came who were my readers, and they were really looking for, who is this guy and everything. Well, it was hard for me. It put me on a trip, really. I had to kind of swallow it, deal with that. And I did, and it was okay. It came out great. Nothing foolish occurred, see? But it's when everybody is looking at you and they all want to bring you your coffee or something, and it's very easy to become inflated, you see? And that's what happens to these gurus. Suddenly, it's really great. You don't have to do anything. You just sit there and people are bringing you shit and girls are flirting with you, men are flirting with you. Yes?
Yeah.
These people are intoxicated, or else they're just crooks who made a living because they have a good line of bullshit that they can sell their videos, whatever it is. Okay, so I think what happens to certain people, and I'm one of them, there are many, I'm not trying to say I'm a genius, I'm not. What happens is you just become aware that that's it. And there's not this other place that you're ever going to get to. You're always going to be steering this ship. If you don't, the ship goes awry totally. We know this. See, this idea of no self that everybody's so excited about, they've misunderstood that entirely. Entirely. It doesn't mean that you don't have a sense of self. You can't survive without a sense of self. It's an automatic. No self means you're not attached to that so that you're saying, I'm Robert, I am this way, these are my beliefs, this is my line of bullshit, this is what I did in my past life, this is what I intend. No. No self is when you don't listen to all that. That's just, and you're in the flow that you were talking about, which I was talking to Bisham about earlier. That flow is all we've got. That is my life. When you say my life, that is your life. Whatever you're conscious of is your life. That's your autobiography, baby. And
So I have a problem that when I speak, I often sound absolutist. I often sound like 100% of what I'm saying is true. But that is really an illusionary thing. If I talk about wanting to free myself of the voices of the society and my parents and all that stuff, yes, I want to do that. But as soon as I imagine I might have done that, I discover a new one hiding behind me I didn't know was there. And when I say I'd like to drop all of my beliefs, because beliefs don't really serve me, they act as barriers between me and the naked reality, however it is, well, that all sounds really wonderful. But as soon as I think I've dropped all my beliefs, I find another one snuck up behind me. And it's all a very long process. But along that process, you do understand a few things, you do achieve a few things, you can name a few things that if I stopped doing that, I was better for stopping to do it. And those are the kind of things that I think that so many people who are desiring to lessen their discomfort in life and improve their subjective appreciation for being here, those things would help them if they're explicitly named and they could actually go off and wrestle with it like a dog wrestles with a bone. And I don't think they're going to find anything like that in ashrams or external systems like reincarnation or anything else.
mm-hmm.
One of the core things I think is that reality just is. It is what it is. And all of our beliefs and all of our thoughts about what it is are nothing but mechanisms to produce unhappiness for us, because it is what it is and it doesn't give a shit what we think. And every time we think something about it that isn't a real reflection of how it is, well, we're just creating a disjoint, a thing that's going to cause us unhappiness. And all of our hopes and our fears and our beliefs are all just ways of us attempting to step away from reality. And I have no idea what reality is. I really don't. You know, I talk to people and I say, oh, we're so brilliant. You know, we know how fast the speed of light is in a vacuum. And we pat ourselves on the back about it. And the next second, you got to admit, we don't know why it's not twice that fast or half that fast. We have no fucking idea. And that's really what most of the universe around us is a giant mystery. But we create a lot of stuff in ourselves with our thoughts and our systems and our beliefs and our theories that end up being the cause of our unhappiness and prevent us from doing what you said, is to just be here.
You express yourself really well. Logic.
Thank you.
Yes. So my reaction to that is that for me, the freedom occurred, if I can put it, it's strange to talk this way, but I found myself free when I wasn't trying to do what you're talking about, which is get everything straight. It was when I realized that I didn't have that power and that all of this was just bubbling up like lava out of from a volcano. And I had no way to prevent anything or gain anything, that was an illusion. And that what I was somehow mysteriously occurring. Robert is alive somehow, whatever that means. I can't conceive of what it means. I have no idea. And that's it. And we have to cope with that, and it's difficult. We have bodies that need food, clothing, and shelter. We have all kinds of strange, conflicted desires, and it goes back to your parents, like you were saying, and a lot of other animal drives. It's crazy, man. It's really fucking crazy. It's a storm. And I think a lot of people fear to be this way because they know that it's going to be a storm that they're going to pass through. All of this shit they've been denying, it's all going to just come flooding in when you realize that you can't stop it. As soon as you kind of say that to the world, you say it to yourself, but you announce to yourself, I'm going to stop trying to fix this and just try to keep my head above water. I'm going to try to surf the waves here, see, instead of trying to hold back the ocean, if I can use that metaphor. that's my stance now. I quoted my wonderful mentor, Walter Chappell, who said this to me that really straightened me out on this one. He said, you know, Robert, you have to chew up your life bite by bite and then swallow it. And he said, and sometimes it's really hard to have enough saliva to get it down. And I think that's what we're really up against. Life is very difficult in many ways and very sad in certain ways, very. And we all know that. But we don't want that to be life. We want life to be victorious. It's going to lead somewhere really groovy. And now I won't be sad anymore. Well, I don't think that's factual. I think that human beings are sad by nature. We're a sad animal. We have this intelligence that's bright enough to ask these questions and have these yearnings, but not bright enough to satisfy them. And so we make shit up. We really are not bright enough to fix it. So we invent religions and philosophies and all this. So someone like me, it's really simple, Dennis. I don't indulge in that pastime. I just try to do the best I can in each moment.
Yes, it is what it is. And I think learning to say yes to it with an ever deeper passion is the way to cut through things.
Except it wasn't, see, when you say it that way, that's the problem I have, because if I said it that way, then people would start to feel Robert says the way to cut through things is adopt such and such an attitude. I don't think you can do that. See, that's the denial of what I've just said. You can't hear something and adopt the attitude. You hear something, then the attitude either arises or it doesn't. When you read something, you either understand it or you don't. You can't make yourself understand it. If something makes sense to you, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's not like this other myself that can say, wait a minute, Robert, this is real. This what you're hearing now is good, so learn it. It's all one piece. If to someone else, I think you really understand me, but to someone else, what I'm saying would sound like gibberish. You can't make someone grasp the immensity of the universe and the smallness of the human ego unless they've experienced it.
But yet we still talk. There is a reason for us to share our thoughts, because every once in a while somebody's going to hear something that's said, right?
That's exactly it. That's
it.
And it's humiliating when you realize it's like being a dental hygienist or something. It's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. It's humiliating. It's not like these realized beings sitting on a throne dispensing wisdom. You know, that's not it. It's a dirty job. I took it on. I was a psychotherapist for 20 years. I retired. I realized that I still had this feeling of love to express, that I feel for humanity and the world and how sad a lot of this is. And we really need to schmooze, you know, we really require some kind of contact, yes? So I provided that professionally. And then when that came to an end, I retired really for 2 or 3 years, battle scars and everything. And then my friend Robert Hall, now my late friend, Dr. Robert Hall, a great Buddhist teacher and psychiatrist, dear friend, he just encouraged me to speak this way. I mean, we'd had these private conversations, and he was a spiritual teacher. So he said, you know, and he kind of seduced me into it by sending me a couple of his people. He said, I can't do anything with them. You talk to them. And so then I had this period for like a couple of years of being a spiritual teacher, not even about 1.5 years. And it was fucked. When I looked into it, it was far inferior to the work I had been doing in psychotherapy. There were too many platitudes. There wasn't enough actual guts, not enough nuts and bolts. And so I just stopped. And then I decided the only way I can approach this is I have to just be completely honest. I can't use other people's words or other ideas that came from spirituality or whatever we call it and rely on that, because that's nothing. It's a big zero. All we have is contact in the moment. And so I'm going on here, but that's my attitude towards all of this.
And I like it. I like it a lot. You can't know, out of all the thousands of people that come in contact with your books and your words, how many of them turn away. The only thing you really know is the ones who show up and want to hear more because they think you might have something to say. And I think all of us are in that situation, and there's such a firestorm of information and theories and words out there. And behind it all is something which is a mystery. And I find it all lovely and fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the thing that really works for me is that I have a lot of people who are readers and who are interested in my work, and with good reason. See, it's hard to actually swallow that, but I have to. The work that I'm doing is, I think, valuable, and I understand why people are attracted to it. I get that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The thing that encourages me is that so many of them are these really great people that I would love to have as a friend or something. I mean, when I actually met some of my readers, they were like some of the best people I'd ever met. It was really fun. They showed up and wow, we had so much fun. I mean, we really did. There wasn't any, there wasn't all this butting of heads. For some reason, these are open-minded, cool people. That was like a year ago, we had this gathering. That was a great experience for me because I realized, yeah, there's something flowing here.
Yeah, I wished I could have come to that. I live in New Zealand, so it really wasn't practical to come up there. But yeah, I was aware of that, and I thought that would be a really nice experience.
Are you in New Zealand now?
I am, yeah.
What time is it there? And what day?
It's Sunday at 9:20 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And my partner's buzzing around in the background, wondering when I'm going to be done with all this so we can get on with our day.
Well, Dennis, it's really a pleasure to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time.
Okay. Well, so you need to get back with your partner now?
I am going to go here in a minute so we can get on with our day, but I appreciate the time to speak with all of you, and Robert and Shiv and all of you. Thank you so much. And I will attend some of these future events too.
Great. Have a good day there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye-bye. You want to jump in here, Shiv, at this point?
Yeah, it's really just interesting watching you and was it Dennis? Dennis, and the conversation, the interchange there. Some of the things Dennis said really rang true for me in that that conditioning is just, there's so many layers to that conditioning, right? I mean, yes, there's the voices of our parents. Those are the primary voices that rattle around in our head for a number of years. And then there's the voices of the society at large, the voices of politicians and belief systems and all of that. And clarifying through those voices to really test that out and find what is my true voice is a lifelong process. I don't think we ever really get to the end of that rabbit hole because the conditioning runs so deep. And so, when you use the term I'm awake, I understand what you're saying by it. I choose not to use it in a similar way because for me, it's all contextual. I can say I'm awake, but awake to what? And to what level of conditioning? To what degree of conditioning? And each time I wake up to another degree of conditioning, I find there's more that I'm not awake to. And there's this deep unconscious within me. And the entire process is making the unconscious conscious. And it's this bottomless void of unconscious conditioning there. And so I hesitate from saying I'm awake because it may be misconstrued as me saying, now it's all conscious to me. And I know that's not what you're saying at all, because you've clarified that there's so many things we're discovering as we go along each day. So I think it's just a matter of semantics and how we use the terms. But to Dennis's point, we can objectively know we can objectively say, and we've read it enough times, that reality is what it is, and our hopes and dreams and wants and all of that, are out of alignment. And all we need to do is focus in on what this reality is. But saying it and actually living that are two completely different things. And I don't think one can just automatically jump to living that reality, because there is that conditioning there. It's generating all this subconscious and unconscious motivations, thoughts, wants. These are powerful energies within us that really move us in different ways. And to think that I can just jump to that reality right away and just do away with all of that really misses the point of what this whole lifetime is about. It's really about clarifying all of that. And in order to clarify it, you have to live it all out. You have to live out your conditioning until it becomes obvious to you that this is not true. This is false to me, not because it makes sense objectively, but because it's felt viscerally. And going from that objective understanding to that visceral reality is a lifelong process. And that's really never ending. We go through layers and layers and layers and layers of it. But that's all okay, because like I said, to me, life is a labor of love. It's an unfinished work. It's a masterpiece you're always adding to and subtracting
from. I'm going to have to say goodbye. I see it. We've been at it for 2.5 hours, and I've got another commitment. But if you want to continue the meeting, and David is willing to keep running it, you've got the space.
Okay, yeah, that's fine with me. I see there's 3 people with questions, so I can just call on people.
Okay, it's been great, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been great talking, Robert.
Really?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you, Robert.
it was great speaking with you, Shiv. Thanks for showing up for this. Very, very.
Absolutely.
All right, a pleasure. So enjoy everything, guys. I'm about to leave. And
Nice to meet you, Robert.
Mm-hmm. Who is that?
Thomas. Tommy.
Hello, I must be going.
All right, take care.
Marx Brothers, hello, I must be going. Hello, I must be going. I can't say I cannot stay. I must be going.